The morning sun cast long shadows across the new Terra Colonial shooting range as Lisa Martinez parked her old truck in the visitor section. She sat for a moment, looking at the fancy building in front of her. The walls were made of shiny metal and glass, very different from the simple farm buildings she was used to seeing every day. Lisa took a deep breath and picked up her rifle case from the passenger seat. The case was old and worn, with scratches and dents from years of use. It looked very plain next to all the expensive hover cars in the parking lot. She had saved money for 6 months just to afford one session at this place. The shooting range was the most expensive one on New Terra. Rich people came here to show off their new weapons and talk about their latest hunting trips. Lisa had heard other farm workers talk about this place, but none of them had ever been inside. They all said it was only for wealthy colonists and business owners. As Lisa walked toward the entrance, she could see other people through the big windows. They were all dressed in expensive clothes and carrying fancy weapon cases. Some had cases that glowed with electronic lights. Others had cases that looked like they cost more than Lisa made in a whole year. The automatic doors opened with a soft sound as Lisa stepped inside. The lobby was huge and filled with bright lights. The floors were made of polished stone that reflected everything like a mirror. Along the walls were displays showing the newest plasma rifles and energy weapons. Price tags showed numbers that made Lisa's eyes go wide. A young woman sat behind a curved desk made of white material that seemed to glow from inside. She looked up at Lisa with a smile that seemed fake. Her clothes were perfect and her hair was styled in a way that must have taken hours to do. "Welcome to New Terra Colonial Shooting Range," the woman said in a voice that sounded too cheerful. "Do you have a reservation?" Lisa shook her head. "No, I was hoping to pay for a single session." The woman's smile got smaller. Her eyes moved down to look at Lisa's simple work clothes and old rifle case. Lisa was wearing the same pants and shirt. She wore to fix farm equipment. They were clean but had small stains that would never come out completely. "I see," the woman said slowly. "Well, our rates are quite high. A basic session is 500 credits for 1 hour. Lisa had expected this. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small stack of credit chips. She had been saving for this day for a long time. "I have the money." The woman looked surprised, but took the credits and processed the payment. She handed Lisa a small electronic card. "Lane 7 is available. Please follow the safety rules at all times." Lisa thanked her and walked toward the range area. She passed through another set of doors and entered a large room filled with shooting lanes. Each lane had electronic controls and fancy target systems. The air smelled like cleaning chemicals and something else she could not identify. The other people in the range turned to look at her as she walked by. Lisa could hear them talking in low voices. Some pointed at her old rifle case. Others looked at her work clothes and whispered to their friends. At lane 5, 3 men were setting up expensive weapons. The first man was tall with perfect hair and clothes that probably cost more than Lisa's truck. His name tag said, Ryan Blake, Blake Industries. He was holding a plasma rifle that hummed with power. Next to him stood a shorter man with a round face who kept laughing loudly. His weapon case had electronic locks and a digital display. The third man was thin and wore glasses that seemed to show information on the lenses. Ryan noticed Lisa setting up at lane 7 and nudged his friends. "Look what we have here," he said loud enough for others to hear. "Looks like someone got lost on their way to the farm equipment store." The short man, whose name tag read Danny Cross, laughed so hard he almost dropped his weapon. "Is that thing even a real gun? It looks like something from a museum." Lisa opened her case and carefully lifted out her rifle. It was made of dark metal and wood, very different from the glowing weapons around her. The rifle was old but well cared for. Every part was clean and properly maintained. Kevin Hall, the thin man with the smart glasses, looked at Lisa's rifle and shook his head. "I didn't know they still made those ancient things. Does it even work, or is it just for show?" Other people in the range started to notice what was happening. A woman with bright blonde hair walked over from lane 3. She was carrying a weapon that looked more like a piece of art than a tool. "Oh my goodness," she said in a high voice. "Is that one of those old projectile weapons? I thought they stopped making those years ago. Lisa continued setting up her equipment without saying anything. She had dealt with people like this before. On New Terra, there were two types of colonists. The wealthy ones who came here to start businesses or invest money, and the working people who came here to farm or build things. The two groups rarely mixed. Ryan stepped closer to Lisa's lane. Hey, farm girl, are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't exactly a beginner's range. We use real weapons here, not antiques. Danny joined in. Maybe she's here to clean the place. Look at those clothes. She definitely works with her hands. Kevin adjusted his smart glasses and pretended to scan Lisa's rifle. My glasses say that weapon is over 50 years old. The computer can't even find current ammunition specs for it. More people gathered to watch what was happening. Lisa could feel their eyes on her as she calmly loaded her rifle. She had learned long ago that the best way to deal with bullies was to ignore them and focus on her task. The range instructor, a middle-aged man named Paul Thompson, walked over to see what was causing the commotion. He looked at Lisa's setup and then at the crowd of wealthy customers watching her. Is everything okay here? Paul asked, but his tone made it clear he was more concerned about keeping his rich customers happy than helping Lisa. Ryan smiled at the instructor. We're just wondering if this lady knows what she's doing. That weapon looks pretty dangerous for someone who's obviously never been to a real shooting range before. Paul looked uncomfortable. He depended on customers like Ryan for his job. These people spent thousands of credits every month at the range. Lisa was just paying for one session. Ma'am, Paul said to Lisa, have you used this type of weapon before? We have safety classes available if you need some basic instruction. Lisa finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. I know how to handle my rifle safely. I just want to practice for an hour and then leave. Danny laughed again. Practice, lady. You should probably start with something simpler. Maybe a training simulator or a children's safety course. The blonde woman giggled. This is so entertaining. I've never seen someone bring a museum piece to a real shooting range before. Lisa finished her setup and looked down the range at the target area. The electronic systems here were much more advanced than anything she had used in years. But targets were still targets no matter how fancy the equipment around them was. Ryan leaned against the wall between the lanes, clearly enjoying himself. Tell you what, farm girl. Why don't you take a few practice shots first? We want to make sure you don't hurt yourself with that ancient thing. Kevin nodded. Yeah, we wouldn't want you to get confused by all this modern equipment. Everything here is computerized and automatic, very different from whatever you're used to. Lisa took a deep breath and stepped up to the firing line. She could feel everyone watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake or give up and leave. But she had come here for a reason, and she was not going to let these people stop her from achieving her goal. The range fell quiet as Lisa raised her rifle and took aim at the target downrange. In the silence, she could hear the humming of electronic weapons and the whispered comments of people who thought she did not belong here. But Lisa Martinez had been in situations like this before, though none of these people could possibly know that she had learned long ago that sometimes the best response to mockery was simply to show what you could do. Lisa held her rifle steady and aimed at the target 100 meters away. The electronic display showed a simple circular target with rings marked for scoring. She had practiced with targets like this many times before, though not in a place like this. Ryan Blake watched her stance and shook his head dramatically. Look at how she's holding that thing. Danny, I bet you 50 credits she can't even hit the target board. Forget about the actual rings. Danny Cross pulled out his credit chip and grinned. You're on. I say she misses completely and hits the wall behind the target. Kevin, you want in on this action? Kevin Hall pushed his smart glasses up his nose and pretended to study Lisa carefully. My analysis shows she has poor form and outdated equipment. I'll bet 100 credits she gives up before taking a shot. The blonde woman from Lane 3 clapped her hands together. Oh, this is so exciting. I love watching beginners try to use real weapons. It's like watching children play dress-up. More people gathered behind Lisa's lane to watch the show. Word was spreading through the range that someone had brought an antique weapon and was about to embarrass herself. Several other wealthy customers stopped their own practice to come see what was happening. Lisa tried to focus on her target, but the voices behind her were getting louder and more distracting. She lowered her rifle and took a deep breath. She had paid good money for this session and deserved to practice in peace. Paul Thompson, the range instructor, walked over to the growing crowd. He saw the potential for trouble but also knew these people spent a lot of money at the range every month. Keeping them happy was more important than protecting one farm worker who might never come back. "Folks, please keep the noise down while someone is shooting," Paul said, but his tone was not serious. He was clearly enjoying the entertainment as much as everyone else. Ryan stepped closer to Lisa and spoke in a voice that everyone could hear. "Ma'am, I really think you should consider taking our beginner's class before trying to use that weapon. We offer a basic safety course that covers how to hold a rifle properly." "Yeah," Danny added. "And maybe we could find you something more appropriate to practice with. We have some training simulators that might be better for someone at your skill level." Lisa turned around to face the crowd. "I just want to practice for the hour I paid for. I'm not bothering anyone." Kevin adjusted his glasses and the lenses flashed with information. "According to my research, weapons like yours were used over 50 years ago. The ammunition is probably unstable by now. You could hurt yourself or damage the range equipment." The blonde woman giggled and whispered to her friend, "Look at her clothes. She probably found that rifle in a barn somewhere and thought it would be fun to play soldier." An older man with gray hair and expensive clothes walked over from lane 1. He looked at Lisa's rifle with obvious disgust. "Young lady, this is a professional facility. We cater to serious shooters with modern equipment. Perhaps you would be more comfortable at one of the public ranges in the agricultural district." Lisa felt her face getting hot with embarrassment, but she kept her voice calm. "I have the right to use this range just like everyone else. I paid the same fee you all did." Ryan laughed and looked around at his audience. "The same fee? Lady, I spend more on ammunition in one day than you probably make in a month. This place isn't for people like you." Danny nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. This is where serious shooters come to practice with serious weapons. Your little antique belongs in a museum, not on a firing range." The crowd was getting larger. Now, nearly everyone in the range had stopped what they were doing to watch Lisa. Some were taking pictures with their smartphones. Others were recording videos to share with their friends later. Paul Thompson realized he needed to do something before the situation got completely out of hand. He walked up to Lisa and spoke in a voice that sounded friendly, but carried a clear message. "Ma'am, I can see you're having some difficulty with our equipment. Maybe it would be better if you came back another time when we're not so busy. I could arrange for some private instruction to help you get started." Lisa understood what he was really saying. He wanted her to leave so his wealthy customers could continue their practice without being disturbed by someone who clearly did not belong here. Kevin stepped forward and pointed at Lisa's rifle. "I've been doing some research on my glasses. That weapon uses ancient projectile technology. It's completely outdated compared to modern plasma and energy weapons. You're basically bringing a stone axe to a laser fight." The crowd laughed at his joke. Several people applauded as if he had said something very clever. Ryan decided to make the situation even worse. "Tell you what, farm girl, since you seem determined to embarrass yourself, why don't we make this interesting? I'll show you how real shooting is done." He walked back to his lane and picked up his plasma rifle. The weapon hummed with power and glowed with blue energy. Electronic displays showed information about target distance, wind conditions, and ammunition status. "Watch and learn," Ryan said as he raised his weapon. The rifle's computer systems automatically adjusted for perfect accuracy. He fired once and the energy bolt hit the center ring of his target. The electronic scoreboard showed a score of 95 out of 100 points. The crowd cheered and applauded. Danny and Kevin congratulated Ryan on his excellent shot. The blonde woman clapped her hands and said it was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. Danny took his turn next. His weapon was different from Ryan's, but just as advanced. It had smart ammunition that could adjust its path after being fired. He aimed quickly and fired. The smart bullet corrected its course in flight and hit very close to the center ring. His score was 92 out of 100. See how easy it is with proper equipment? Danny said to Lisa. These weapons are designed for accuracy. They practically aim themselves. Kevin was next. His rifle had the most advanced computer system of all. It was connected to his smart glasses and could share targeting information directly with his brain. He barely seemed to aim before firing. His score was 94 out of 100. The crowd was impressed by all three performances. They talked about how skilled these men were and how their expensive equipment made perfect shots possible. Ryan walked back over to Lisa with a big smile on his face. That's how professionals do it, sweetheart. Maybe now you understand why your little antique doesn't belong here. Lisa looked at the three targets with their impressive scores. She had to admit that the shots were very good, even if the weapons did most of the work automatically. Now, Ryan continued, why don't you pack up that museum piece and find somewhere more appropriate to practice? I'm sure there's a farm shooting range somewhere that would be perfect for someone like you. Danny joined in. Yeah, and maybe you could save up some money to buy a real weapon. Something from this decade would be a good start. The blonde woman laughed. This has been so entertaining. I've never seen someone so out of place before. It's like watching someone try to race a horse against a hover car. Paul Thompson cleared his throat. Ma'am, I really think it would be best if you considered coming back another time. These other customers have reserved this time for serious practice. Lisa looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked amused. Others looked annoyed that she was wasting their time. A few seemed genuinely curious about what she would do next. She had two choices. She could pack up her rifle and leave, avoiding further embarrassment. Or she could stay and prove that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. Lisa Martinez had faced harder decisions than this before, though none of these people knew that. She had learned long ago that running away from bullies only made them stronger. I'm not leaving, she said quietly but firmly. I paid for an hour, and I'm going to use every minute of it. The crowd murmured with surprise. They had expected her to give up and leave after being shown how outclassed she was. Ryan's smile faded. He had not expected this farm worker to have any backbone at all. Fine, he said, but don't blame us when you embarrass yourself even more than you already have. Ryan Blake's face turned red with anger. He had expected Lisa to give up and leave after seeing how much better he and his friends were with their expensive weapons. Instead, she was standing her ground and refusing to be pushed around. Fine, Ryan said, his voice getting louder. If you want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone, that's your choice. But let's make this really interesting. He walked over to Paul Thompson, the range instructor, and whispered something in his ear. Paul's eyes got wide and he shook his head at first, but Ryan kept talking. Finally, Paul nodded and walked over to the main control panel. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul announced over the range's speaker system, we're going to have a special demonstration today. Lane 12 will be activated with the Advanced Military Training Course. A murmur went through the crowd. Lane 12 was special. It was twice as wide as the other lanes and had the most advanced target system in the entire facility. The military training course was designed for professional soldiers and security forces. Most of the wealthy customers had never even tried it. Danny Cross clapped his hands together. Oh, this is going to be good. Ryan, you're a genius. Kevin Hall's smart glasses flickered as they accessed information about the military course. According to my data, this course has a 95% failure rate for first-time users. Even experienced shooters rarely score above 60%. The blonde woman from Lane 3 grabbed her friend's arm. What's the military course? I've never seen it before. An older man who had been watching from the side stepped forward. It's the hardest shooting test on New Terra. Moving targets, at different distances, some as far as 500 meters. Wind simulation, lighting changes, obstacles that block your view. It's designed to test real combat skills. Lisa watched as Paul activated the course. Mechanical systems hummed to life and the lane extended much further than the normal ranges. Target platforms rose from the floor at various distances. Some were stationary, but others began moving back and forth or up and down. Ryan walked over to Lisa with a big smile on his face. Here's the deal, farm girl. We'll all take turns on the military course. If you can match our scores, we'll leave you alone for the rest of your session. He paused, and his smile got bigger and meaner. But when you fail, and we all know you, will you pack up that antique and leave? and you don't come back to this range ever again." Danny nodded enthusiastically. "That's fair, right? You get a chance to prove yourself, and we get to show everyone why this place is for serious shooters, only." The crowd pressed closer to hear what Lisa would say. Some people were taking bets on whether she would accept the challenge. Others were already recording videos to capture her failure. Lisa looked down the extended lane at the complex course. She could see targets at many different distances, some partially hidden behind barriers. The course was much harder than anything she had practiced on in years. Paul Thompson walked over and lowered his voice. "Ma'am, I really don't recommend this. The military course is extremely difficult. Even our best customers rarely score well on their first attempt." Kevin pushed his glasses up and the lenses flashed with data. "My analysis shows this course requires advanced training and years of experience. Someone with your obvious lack of skill has no chance of success." The blonde woman giggled. "This is so exciting. I can't wait to see what happens when she tries to use that old rifle on a real challenge." Lisa knew she was being set up. These people expected her to fail so badly that she would be too embarrassed to ever come back. They wanted to humiliate her completely and make sure she knew she didn't belong in their world. But Lisa Martinez had faced challenges before that these wealthy colonists could never imagine. She had been tested in ways that made this shooting course look like a child's game, though none of them could know that. "I accept," Lisa said quietly. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. They had expected her to back down when faced with such an impossible challenge. Ryan's smile got even bigger. "Excellent. This is going to be the most entertaining hour of my week." Paul Thompson sighed and walked back to the control panel. "The course will run for 10 minutes. Each shooter gets to study the targets for 2 minutes before beginning. Scoring is automatic and based on accuracy, timing, and target priority." He paused and looked directly at Lisa. "Ma'am, are you absolutely sure about this? There's no shame in admitting when something is beyond your abilities." Lisa nodded. "I'm sure." Danny rubbed his hands together excitedly. "Who goes first?" "I vote. We save the best for last." He pointed at Lisa. "Let's watch the professionals show how it's done, then we can all enjoy the grand finale." Ryan agreed. "Good idea. Kevin, you go first and set the bar nice and high." Kevin walked to lane 12 and studied the course layout. His smart glasses scanned each target and calculated distances, wind patterns, and optimal shooting positions. After 2 minutes, he raised his advanced rifle and began firing. The course was impressive to watch. Targets appeared and disappeared at different distances. Some moved quickly across the lane while others popped up briefly from behind barriers. Kevin's rifle had computer assistance, but even with help, the course was extremely challenging. When Kevin finished, the electronic scoreboard showed his results: 340 points out of 500 possible. The crowd applauded politely. It was a decent score for such a difficult course. "Not bad for a warm-up," Kevin said, trying to sound casual, but Lisa could tell he was disappointed with his performance. Danny went next. His smart ammunition helped him hit several difficult targets, but the course's complexity still challenged. Even his advanced weapon systems, his final score was 365 points. "Better than Kevin," Danny announced proudly. "Let's see you beat that, Ryan." Ryan took his position and studied the course carefully. His plasma rifle was the most expensive weapon of the three, with the most advanced targeting systems. He fired methodically, taking time to line up each shot perfectly. When Ryan finished, the scoreboard displayed 389 points. The crowd cheered loudly. It was the highest score of the day and clearly the result of both skill and expensive equipment. "Now that," Ryan said with satisfaction, "is how professionals handle a real challenge." He turned to Lisa with a triumphant expression. "Your turn, sweetheart. Try not to hurt yourself with that museum piece." The crowd gathered closely around lane 12 to watch Lisa's attempt. Many people had their phones ready to record what they expected to be a complete disaster. Paul Thompson made one final attempt to save Lisa from public humiliation. "Ma'am, Ryan's score of 389 is exceptionally high. Even experienced shooters would have trouble matching it. Are you certain you want to proceed?" Lisa walked to the firing line and looked down the course. Without computer assistance or smart ammunition, She would have to rely entirely on her own skills and knowledge. The targets looked small at the longer distances, and she could see how the wind simulation would affect bullet trajectory. She set her old rifle on the shooting rest and adjusted the simple iron sights. Compared to the glowing displays and electronic systems of the other weapons, her equipment looked primitive and inadequate. The crowd was completely quiet now, waiting to see if she would actually attempt the course or finally admit defeat. Ryan crossed his arms and smiled. "Take all the time you need to study the targets, though I don't think it's going to help much with that antique." Danny and Kevin stood behind Ryan, all three men looking confident that they were about to witness the most one-sided competition in the range's history. Lisa took a deep breath and shouldered her rifle. She had accepted their challenge, and now she had to follow through. In a few minutes, she would either prove she belonged here or confirm everything these people believed about her. The electronic timer began counting down her 2 minutes of preparation time. Lisa studied each target carefully, noting distances, movement patterns, and the best shooting positions. Unlike the others, she had no computer to help with calculations. Everything would depend on her own knowledge and experience. When the preparation time ended, Paul Thompson's voice came over the speaker system. "Shooter ready. Course will begin in 10 seconds. Lisa positioned herself behind her rifle and took aim at the first target. Around her, the crowd held its breath, phones recording, waiting to see if a simple farm worker with an old rifle could possibly compete with wealthy colonists and their advanced weapons. The course began, and Lisa's real test started. The course timer started counting down from 10 minutes. Lisa took a deep breath and focused on the first target that appeared 200 meters away. It was a simple, circular target that stayed still for 5 seconds before disappearing. She aimed carefully through her iron sights and squeezed the trigger. The old rifle kicked against her shoulder with a familiar feeling. The bullet hit the target near the center ring, and the electronic system recorded a score of 8 out of 10 points. The crowd murmured with surprise. Most people had expected her to miss the first target completely. Ryan shook his head and laughed. "Lucky shot. Let's see how she does when the course gets harder." The second target appeared at 300 meters and began moving slowly from left to right. Lisa tracked its movement and fired when it reached the center of its path. Another hit, scoring 7 points. Danny frowned. "She's not doing as badly as I expected, but wait until the really difficult targets show up." Kevin adjusted his smart glasses and studied Lisa's shooting form. She has decent basic technique, but she can't possibly handle the advanced sections without computer assistance. More targets began appearing at different distances and speeds. Some popped up for just 2 seconds before disappearing. Others moved in complex patterns that required the shooter to predict where they would be when the bullet arrived. Lisa worked steadily through each challenge. Her old rifle fired 1 shot at a time, unlike the advanced weapons that could fire multiple rounds quickly. She had to make every shot count because she couldn't afford to waste ammunition on missed targets. At the 4-minute mark, the course introduced moving targets at 400 meters. These were much smaller and faster than the earlier ones. The crowd expected Lisa to start missing badly at this distance. She took extra time to aim at the first long-distance target. Through her iron sights, it looked tiny and moved quickly across her field of view. She fired, and the electronic system showed another hit. 6 points this time, but still a successful shot. Paul Thompson watched the scoreboard with growing amazement. "She's actually keeping up with a decent pace. I wasn't expecting this." The blonde woman stopped giggling and watched more carefully. "How is she hitting anything with that old gun? It doesn't even have a computer scope." Ryan's confident smile was starting to fade. "It's just the easy part of the course. Wait until she gets to the really hard sections." At the 6-minute mark, the course became much more challenging. Multiple targets appeared at the same time, forcing the shooter to prioritize which ones to engage first. Some targets were worth more points than others, and choosing the wrong sequence could cost valuable score. Lisa studied the pattern for a few seconds, then began firing in a careful sequence. She ignored the closest targets and focused on the high-value ones that appeared briefly at longer distances. Her strategy was different from what the 3 men had done. but it seemed to be working. Danny watched her technique with growing concern. She's using military target prioritization. How does a farm worker know combat shooting principles? Kevin's glasses flickered as they analyzed Lisa's performance. Her accuracy is holding steady even at extended ranges. This is highly unusual for someone using basic equipment. The 7-minute mark brought the most difficult part of the course. Targets appeared at 500 meters, partially hidden behind barriers, and moved in unpredictable patterns. The lighting changed randomly to simulate different combat conditions. Wind simulation made bullet trajectory much harder to calculate. This was where all three men had struggled the most. Even with their advanced weapons and computer assistance, hitting targets at this distance required exceptional skill. Lisa paused for a moment and wiped sweat from her forehead. The crowd was completely quiet now, watching to see if she could handle this final challenge. Many people had stopped recording videos and were simply staring in amazement at what they were witnessing. She raised her rifle and aimed at a target that appeared for just 3 seconds at maximum range. The wind simulation pushed against her, and the changing lights made it hard to see clearly. She fired, and the bullet traveled the full 500 meters to hit the target dead center. The crowd gasped. Hitting a target at that distance with iron sights and no computer assistance was nearly impossible. Most professional shooters would be proud of such a shot. Ryan's face was getting red with anger and embarrassment. That was another lucky shot. She can't keep this up. But Lisa did keep it up. Target after target fell to her careful, methodical shooting. She wasted no ammunition and made no hurried shots. Each bullet was placed exactly where she intended it to go. Danny started pacing, nervously behind the firing line. This doesn't make sense. She should be missing everything by now. That rifle is ancient. Kevin pulled up more data on his smart glasses. According to my analysis, she's shooting better than 90% of the customers who attempt this course. With basic equipment, her performance is statistically impossible. At the 9-minute mark, the course presented its final challenge. A series of small, fast-moving targets appeared at various distances simultaneously. The shooter had to engage, all of them within 60 seconds while dealing with maximum wind simulation and rapidly changing lighting conditions. This was the section that had cost Ryan several points and prevented him from achieving a perfect score. His plasma rifle's computer had struggled to track all the targets at once. Lisa looked down the range at the complex target array. Without any electronic assistance, she would have to rely entirely on her own abilities to track multiple moving targets and calculate the best shooting sequence. The final sequence began, and targets started moving in all directions. Lisa began firing with a steady rhythm, moving from target to target with smooth precision. She never seemed to hesitate or second-guess her aim. One by one, the targets fell to her shots. The electronic scoring system recorded hit after hit as she worked through the entire sequence. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she completed the most difficult part of the course without missing a single target. When the 10-minute timer reached 0, the course went silent. All the moving targets stopped and the wind simulation shut off. The electronic scoreboard began calculating Lisa's final score. Ryan, Danny, and Kevin stood frozen, staring at the scoreboard as it processed the results. The crowd pressed closer to see the final numbers. Paul Thompson shook his head in disbelief. In 15 years of running this range, I've never seen anything like that performance. The blonde woman whispered to her friend, "How did she do that? It's impossible to shoot that well without computer help." An older man who had been watching from the back of the crowd stepped forward. He had gray hair and wore simple clothes, unlike the other wealthy customers. His eyes were fixed on Lisa with a strange expression of recognition. The scoreboard continued calculating, processing each shot and adding up the total points. The crowd waited in tense silence to see if a simple farm worker with an old rifle had somehow managed to compete with wealthy colonists and their advanced weapons. Ryan's confident smile was completely gone now. He looked worried and confused, unable to understand how someone he had dismissed as a nobody could perform so well on such a difficult course. Danny and Kevin exchanged nervous glances. They had expected to witness a humiliating failure, but instead they had seen something that challenged everything they believed about skill, equipment, and who belonged at their exclusive shooting range. Lisa lowered her rifle and stepped back from the firing line. She looked calm and relaxed, as if completing the military course had been nothing more than a normal practice session. But everyone else in the range was holding their breath, waiting to see the final score that would determine whether she had earned their respect or confirmed their prejudices. The electronic scoreboard finished its calculations and prepared to display the results that would shock everyone in the room. The electronic scoreboard flickered as it finished calculating Lisa's performance. Numbers appeared and disappeared while the computer processed each shot she had taken during the 10-minute course. The entire range was completely silent except for the humming of electronic equipment. Ryan Blake stood with his arms crossed, still trying to look confident, but sweat was visible on his forehead. He kept glancing at the scoreboard and then back at Lisa, who stood calmly beside her old rifle, as if nothing unusual had happened. Danny Cross was no longer laughing. His face was pale and he kept wiping his hands on his expensive shooting jacket. Kevin Hall's smart glasses were flickering rapidly as they tried to analyze what they had just witnessed. The blonde woman grabbed her friend's arm. "Why is it taking so long? What's wrong with the computer?" Paul Thompson walked over to the main control panel and checked the system readings. "Nothing's wrong. The computer is just processing an unusually complex scoring pattern. I've never seen it take this long before." Finally, the scoreboard stopped flickering. Large numbers appeared on the display, visible to everyone in the range. The crowd pressed closer to read the results. Lisa Martinez, final score, 500 out of 100 points. Perfect score. The range fell completely silent. No one moved or spoke for several long seconds. The numbers on the scoreboard seemed impossible, but there they were for everyone to see. Ryan stared at the display with his mouth hanging open. "That's impossible. The computer must be broken." Danny shook his head slowly. "A perfect score? No one gets a perfect score on the military course. Even professional soldiers rarely score above 400. Kevin's smart glasses were flashing error messages as they tried to process what had happened. "My analysis software can't explain this result. The statistical probability of achieving a perfect score with basic equipment is less than 1%. Paul Thompson checked the computer system 3 times, but the results were accurate. Every shot Lisa had taken was recorded as a perfect hit, not just hits, but dead center impacts on every single target. The older man with gray hair who had been watching from the back of the crowd stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on Lisa with growing recognition. He walked slowly toward her, studying her face and her rifle. The crowd began murmuring in confused voices. Some people thought the computer had made a mistake. Others were taking pictures of the scoreboard with their phones, not believing what they were seeing. "There has to be an error," Ryan said loudly. "Run the scoring again. Check every calculation." Paul Thompson nodded and activated the review system. The computer displayed each of Lisa's shots on a large screen, showing exactly where every bullet had hit. Target after target showed perfect center hits, even the most difficult ones at 500 meters. The blonde woman stared at the screen in shock. "Every single shot is perfect. How is that possible?" Danny walked closer to Lisa and looked at her old rifle with new respect. "What kind of modifications have you made to that weapon? It must have hidden computer systems." Lisa shook her head. "No modifications. This rifle is exactly the way it was made 50 years ago. Iron sights, standard barrel, basic trigger mechanism." Kevin removed his smart glasses and cleaned them, then put them back on and ran another scan of Lisa's rifle. "My equipment confirms no electronic modifications, no computer assistance, no smart ammunition. Everything is completely standard." The crowd was getting restless. These wealthy colonists were used to being the best at everything they tried. Their expensive equipment and advanced training had always guaranteed success. Seeing someone with basic gear perform better than them was disturbing and confusing. Ryan's face was bright red now. "I don't care what the computer says, no one shoots that well with an antique rifle. There has to be some kind of trick." The older man with gray hair finally reached Lisa and stopped a few feet away from her. He looked at her rifle, then at her shooting stance, then directly into her eyes. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly. "May I ask where you learned to shoot like that?" Lisa looked at the man and noticed something the others had missed. Despite his simple clothes, he stood very straight and moved with the careful precision of someone with military training. His eyes were sharp and alert, constantly scanning the room. "I learned a long time ago," Lisa said simply. The man nodded slowly. "That rifle, is it a Model 47 Precision variant?" "Yes, it is." "And the serial number starts with MDF?" Lisa's eyes widened slightly. Very few people would know those specific details about military rifles. "How did you know that?" The man smiled, for the first time since entering the range. "Because I carried one just like it for 20 years. Military issue, designed for long-range precision work." The crowd overheard this conversation and pressed closer to listen. Ryan pushed his way forward, still angry and confused. "What are you talking about? She's just a farm worker. Look at her clothes." The older man turned to face Ryan with a stern expression. "Son, you'd be surprised how many different jobs people do after they finish their military service. Some become businessmen." He gestured at Ryan's expensive clothes. "Others choose to work with their hands and grow food." Kevin's smart glasses were now focused on the older man, trying to identify him. Information began appearing on the lenses, and Kevin's face went pale. "Sir?" Kevin said nervously. "My glasses say you're Colonel Joe Barnes, retired. You commanded the 3rd Colonial Defense Regiment." Colonel Barnes nodded. "That's correct, and unless I'm very much mistaken, this young lady served under my command." He turned back to Lisa. "Sergeant Martinez, isn't it? You were our best long-range specialist." The crowd gasped. Several people stepped back as they realized they had been watching a former military sniper, not a simple farm worker. Lisa straightened, her posture slightly. "Yes, sir. Sergeant Lisa Martinez, 3rd Colonial Defense Regiment, retired." Danny's mouth fell open. "You're a military sniper, but you work on a farm now." "I chose to leave military service and start a peaceful life," Lisa explained. "Growing food seemed like a better way to help people than carrying a rifle." Ryan was shaking his head in denial. "This is ridiculous. Even if she was in the military, that was years ago. Skills fade without practice." Colonel Barnes laughed. "Son, you don't understand military training. Once you learn to shoot at that level, you never really lose it. It becomes part of who you are." He gestured toward the scoreboard, which still showed Lisa's perfect score. Sergeant Martinez wasn't just any sniper. She held the colonial record for longest confirmed hit, over 800 meters in combat conditions. The crowd was stunned into silence. They had spent the entire morning mocking someone who was probably the most skilled shooter on the entire planet. Paul Thompson finally found his voice. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. We all do. If I had known about your background..." Lisa raised her hand to stop him. "You didn't know, because I didn't tell you. I came here to practice, not to show off or prove anything to anyone." She looked around at the crowd of wealthy colonists who had been so certain she didn't belong here. "I just wanted to spend an hour shooting targets and remember what it felt like to be really good at something." Ryan was staring at the scoreboard, finally understanding that he had challenged one of the most skilled marksmen in colonial history to a shooting contest. His expensive plasma rifle and computer assistance had been completely outclassed by simple skill and experience. The blonde woman who had been laughing at Lisa's clothes was now looking embarrassed and ashamed. "I'm sorry. We didn't know. We thought..." "You thought I was just a simple farm worker who didn't belong here," Lisa finished. "And you were right about the farm worker part. But being simple doesn't mean being unskilled." Colonel Barnes smiled proudly. Sergeant Martinez always was one for understatement. "What she's not telling you is that she saved more lives than any other soldier in the regiment. Her skills protected entire convoys from enemy fire." Lisa began packing her rifle back into its worn case. The crowd watched in respectful silence as she carefully secured the weapon that had just humbled them all. The perfect score remained on the electronic display, a permanent record of what real skill could accomplish. Lisa finished packing her rifle and closed the worn case with a soft click. The sound seemed very loud in the quiet range. Everyone was still staring at the scoreboard that showed her perfect score, as if looking at it long enough would make the numbers change. Colonel Barnes stepped closer to Lisa and spoke in a voice that carried respect and old friendship. "How long has it been since you left the service, Sergeant?" 3 years, sir. I mustered out after my final tour and came to New Terra to start fresh. The colonel nodded with understanding. "And you chose farming?" Lisa smiled for the first time since entering the range. Growing things instead of destroying them seemed like a good change. The farm keeps me busy and the work is honest. Ryan Blake was still staring at the scoreboard in disbelief. His face had gone from red to pale as he realized how badly he had misjudged the situation. "But why didn't you say anything? Why let us think you were just a beginner?" Lisa picked up her rifle case and looked at Ryan calmly. "Because I am just a farmer now. What I used to do doesn't matter anymore. I came here to practice, not to impress anyone or prove I was better than you." Danny Cross shook his head slowly. "But we were so rude to you. We made fun of your clothes, your rifle, everything. If you had known, you would have treated me differently," Lisa finished. "But that would have been for the wrong reasons. People should be treated with respect no matter what job they do or what clothes they wear." Kevin Hall removed his smart glasses and cleaned them nervously. "I'm sorry about what I said earlier. About your rifle being primitive and outdated. I was wrong." Lisa looked at Kevin's expensive weapon with its glowing displays and computer systems. "Your rifle isn't wrong and mine isn't right. They're just different tools for different purposes. Your equipment makes shooting easier for most people. That's not a bad thing." The blonde woman who had been laughing earlier stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I was horrible to you. I don't know why I acted that way." "You acted that way because you thought I was different from you," Lisa said gently. "But we're all just people trying to do our best. Rich or poor, military or civilian, we all deserve basic kindness." Paul Thompson walked over and extended his hand to Lisa. "Ma'am, I owe you the biggest apology of all. As the range instructor, I should have stopped the harassment immediately. Instead, I let it continue because I was worried about losing customers." Lisa shook his hand. "You were protecting your job. I understand that. But maybe next time you could remember that everyone who pays the fee deserves to use this range in peace." Paul nodded seriously. "You're absolutely right. And I want you to know that you're welcome here anytime. Your money is no good here from now on. Anytime you want to practice, it's on the house." "That's very kind, but I can pay my own way," Lisa replied. "I just want to be treated like any other customer." Colonel Barnes had been listening to this conversation with growing pride. Sergeant Martinez always was the most decent person in the regiment. She never let rank or skill go to her head. He turned to address the crowd. "You all learned something important today. This woman could have destroyed you in any shooting competition you wanted to name. Instead, she chose to live quietly and grow food to feed people. That takes more courage than carrying a rifle." Ryan was looking down at his expensive plasma rifle with a new understanding. All this advanced equipment, and it didn't matter at all when it came to real skill. "Equipment helps," Lisa said, "but it can't replace knowledge and practice. Your rifle is very good, and in the right hands it would be even better than what I showed today." Danny looked confused. "But you got a perfect score. How could we do better than perfect?" Lisa smiled. "Perfect scores are just numbers on a computer. Real shooting is about much more than hitting targets. It's about making the right decisions under pressure, protecting people who depend on you, and knowing when not to shoot at all." Kevin was studying his smart glasses with new thoughts. "I've been so focused on having the best technology that I forgot about developing real skills. Maybe I should spend more time practicing basic techniques." "Technology and skill work best together," Lisa agreed. "But if you only have one, skill will serve you better in the long run." The crowd began to disperse as people returned to their own shooting lanes. Many stopped to apologize to Lisa as they passed. Others simply nodded with respect, finally understanding what they had witnessed. An elderly woman who had been watching from the side approached Lisa. "Dear, I just wanted to say thank you. My grandson is in the Colonial Defense Force, and knowing there are people like you watching over our children makes me sleep better at night." Lisa's expression softened. "The young soldiers today are very good, much better trained than we were when I started. You don't need to worry about your grandson." Colonel Barnes waited until most of the crowd had left before speaking again. "Lisa, I have to ask. The colony is expanding and we're training new defense units. We could use someone with your experience as an instructor." Lisa shook her head gently. "Thank you, sir, but I'm happy with my choice. The farm keeps me busy, and I like the peace and quiet." "I understand. But if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. We could use more people who understand that the best warriors are the ones who choose not to fight unless they have to." Lisa picked up her rifle case and headed toward the exit. Ryan, Danny, and Kevin watched her go, all of them thinking about what they had learned. Paul Thompson called after her. "Sergeant Martinez, will we see you again?" Lisa turned back with a small smile. "Maybe." This was actually quite relaxing once everyone calmed down. As she walked through the lobby, the young woman at the reception desk looked up with wide eyes. Word had already spread about what happened on the range. "Ma'am," the receptionist said quietly, "I'm sorry about how I treated you when you arrived. I judged you by your appearance, and that was wrong." "We all make mistakes," Lisa replied. "The important thing is learning from them." She walked out to the parking lot where her old truck waited among the expensive hover cars. As she put her rifle case in the passenger seat, she could see people watching her through the range windows. Lisa drove slowly back toward her farm, past fields of growing crops and simple buildings that housed the working families of New Terra. This was her world now, far from the complexity and danger of military life. But today had reminded her of something important. Skills earned through hard work and sacrifice never really leave you. They become part of who you are, whether you're holding a rifle or planting seeds. At her small farmhouse, Lisa parked the truck and carried her rifle case inside. She opened the case one more time and looked at the weapon that had served her so well for so many years. Then she closed the case and put it back in the closet, returning to the peaceful life she had chosen. Tomorrow there would be crops to tend and equipment to repair. The simple, honest work that fed people and built communities. The perfect score would be forgotten eventually, but the lesson about treating all people with respect would hopefully last much longer. And that, Lisa thought, was worth more than any number on an electronic scoreboard.